Hello, everybody. You probably just heard my friend who's coming on tonight with his hello, but this is good. He will be on with us shortly, but welcome to tonight's episode of Shrink Wrap, where I'm going to be talking with a friend of mine from college. His name is Sonny Flippo. He's a fellow therapist, and he is working in the prison systems for his career. So hopefully tonight maybe we get to hear a little bit of his experiences there. But we're going to be talking about a pretty, I would say, intense or maybe a dark topic for some people. However, I hope that when you hear the topic tonight, you won't shy away from it, but maybe what you'll do is you'll join in on the conversation, because that's one thing that we all know that we can do about this topic is to talk about it, bring awareness to it, and help destigmatize the whole idea of suicide. Suicide is it's something that we experience with our loved ones, with our friends. There's no one immune to the ideas of suicide or to the successes of suicide. So the idea of talking about it and bringing awareness to it is, I hope what you guys tonight, again, will get out of our programming and begin to chime in with us here and when you're jumping on. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot this week, and I kind of want to talk about it a little bit before I bring Sonny on, and Sonny's listening, so he's going to hear some of this as well. It's just as a mental health provider, what I'm seeing over the past 5 or 6 months through the pandemic and through what we've been going through as a world and as a country, and particularly here in the state of Texas, in dealing with the pandemic. We all had to learn a very new and a very different way of life very quickly. Within a 24-hour period, really, we were all beginning to quarantine, shelter in place, all these things that we've begun to have as part of our natural conversation. You know, never before have we ever used the word shelter in place or quarantine or social distancing, all these terms that we're using now. Never before have really those become part of our natural conversations or natural way of thinking in life. So when you talk about this way that we are, I've been thinking a lot about that recently and about, maybe some of the explanation, some, not all by all means, but some of the explanation of why I think we're seeing so much anxiety, so much depression, so much obsessive compulsive type things, so much domestic violence, so many things that are coming out of this pandemic that we're all experiencing together. And the one thing that has been striking me in my own thinking over the past week or two is the idea that we're expected to find what they're calling what is the new normal, what is the new norm. How are we going to come out on the other side of this with a new norm? Part of what we're considering as a new norm are behaviors that really we don't do normally. I mean, social distancing, for example, is not a normal thing. Wearing masks everywhere we go is not a normal thing. So we're expected to have this new norm. And so if the new norm is here and we're all trying to adapt to a new norm, and here is where really normal or expected level of behavior is for us all, I wonder how many people out there, if I were to ask the question, do you feel like you're walking around in a fog, looking down on your experiences like life is happening below you and you're watching it all play out? How many people would resonate with that comment? If you do, it's probably because we're all in a very dissociative type state. That's a dissociation when we're experiencing something that's so out of character and out of normal that our mind and our psyche removes us from that to protect us from what's going on. So there's that dissociation happening. And when we're walking around dissociatively and we're walking around in this dissociative type state, then I do wonder how much that impacts our anxieties and our depressions. So we might have some more people coming on in a couple of weeks in the next couple of sessions to talk about that. But this is Suicide Awareness Month. September is Suicide Awareness Month. And tonight I'm going to bring on a friend of mine again named Sonny Flippo. He's an LPC and psychotherapist at the prison systems. We actually went to college together, and you're going to hear some of our stories maybe from my time in college and since. We've remained friends. We've remained in contact with each other for quite some time. So please welcome tonight, Sonny Flippo. Sonny, thanks for joining me. So you get to hear my my welcome tonight about the dissociation part.
Yeah.
What do you think about that as a therapist? I mean, here have you had time to really kind of to sit and ponder kind of the life that we're living and kind of what that's like for us as people?
A little bit, 'cause, in the prison system, we never shut down. We kept going. And
Yes.
so, and COVID hit us pretty hard. The unit that I work at, which is the holiday unit in Huntsville, at one point we had, I think, over 300 plus cases on
That's,
our unit.
wow.
And so, and there was so much unknown, a very scary time, trying to think about, how do you protect yourself so you don't bring this home to your family. I can remember at the very beginning, I mean, just a lot of anxiety, personal anxiety about, how am I going to do my job? What am I
Right.
exposing myself to? Do I come home? Does my family go stay at my parents' house? Do I need
Yeah,
to,
right.
stay by myself? Just a lot of different things.
Yeah, so even at that point when you're experiencing that, at the beginning, like a lot of us, we really, and that's part of the thing, is we really didn't know what we were dealing with at the very beginning. And I think that's what kind of increased kind of some of that hysteria for all of us. And you're right, you're in a position to where, I think the majority of the people probably were respectful and kind of just as concerned. I don't want people to think every inmate is giving you a hard time in the prison systems, but you have a lot of people in a very compacted space, and so when you're coming home from that, you are worried. You're worried. Are you going to bring it back to your family? And we never shut down. Here in the clinic, we continued to see patients, and of course, a lot of our patients did go to telemedicine, but there were people who just really preferred to come in, and so we were still, seeing those people come in and day by day. Yeah, it's just kind of a weird time. It's a weird time. I
Yeah,
told everybody we've known each other for quite a while. I'm not going to tell everybody how long, but I really don't care if we tell them or not. Actually, it was in the '80s. When did you come to Hardin-Baylor? When did we come? When did we come to Hardin-Baylor, and when did we actually leave? That's a whole other
yeah,
story.
yeah. The decade plan started in, I guess, 88 or 89. I graduated from high school in 88.
Yeah,
So I guess it was 88 that I came in, and
yeah.
I graduated in 1995. Yes, I did.
There you go. Well, I came in '89, and I graduated in 1995. Yes, I did. Do you remember?
Awesome.
We actually graduated at the same time.
That's awesome.
That's just too funny. So yeah, we were on whatever year plan that we were on. But in all fairness, I think well, for me, I know I came out with. I had several different degrees that I worked on during that time frame. Music was one of them, music performance, and then of course I went into psychology. In between times, should my accountant be watching tonight, he was also my accounting professor, and I did, yes, surprise to everybody, I actually studied accounting for 3 semesters. Two of
Oh,
them were summer sessions that I got F's in both of the accounting courses. So I decided to try to do it one more time in the fall and got a big whopping D. At which point, my accounting professor kindly told me I probably needed to find another degree plan.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah,
So
I
you
went
had,
there on Baylor, and I was going to be an attorney. That was my
yeah,
goal. And I took political science my very first semester, and I won't say who the professor was. Probably not even alive right now. That's not funny. He would be really old. Well, I won't say his name. But anywho, I realized that I was going to have to take that same professor numerous times because Maryland Baylor, we didn't have a lot of selections
yes,
as far as in those programs,
right.
and I just didn't enjoy it that much, and so I was like, I'm going to go a different route.
Yeah, there you go. Do I think it's important for people to know, like, if you are a college student watching this, you're going to have about 5 degree plans before you leave the university. I mean, it's really, really common. Hey, so, Sonny, I'm going to tell you, we need to say a shout out to Drew Fitzgerald. He's on here watching with us tonight. So, hey, Drew, how are you?
Drew
Uh,
Fitzgerald, man, great
yeah,
player.
great basketball player. We
Drew,
had some fun
and
times.
because me and Drew worked together at Central Freight Lines as lumpers unloading 18 wheelers.
Yeah, are
And
you
so
serious? In college?
in college, I guarantee if Drew's watching right now, he's sitting there cracking up laughing because he and I only know how hard that was and how much stuff we ruined and put back on the trailers.
So, Drew, if you're hearing it, chime in. Give us some stories to talk about, mate. And also, Carlton Pridgeon is on. Amy Beeson. Hey, everybody. Jeremy Franks is on. Hey, Jeremy. Also, I have a colleague and friend of mine who's going to be on next week, actually, guys, who's going to be talking about finding our voice. Carol Meyer-Williams on tonight. So, hey, Carol, nice to see you here. And my cousin Tracy Straley, all the way from Louisiana. Hey, Tracy, how are you? So let's get to talking about a little bit, Sonny, what you and I talked about a little bit. You called me several weeks ago, and you had an idea. Tell everybody what your idea was a couple of weeks ago when you gave me a ring.
Yeah, I had been watching the news, and I'd seen that in Lubbock, Texas, a meteorologist had committed suicide. There was a lady well known in that area,
Uh-huh.
and it had just the report, and it mentioned that her own son had committed suicide. I can't remember how long before
Wow.
she had, but then she had mentioned, I guess, it posted on Facebook a lengthy post that her brain was broken, and those
Wow.
were her words. And here we are doing all this stuff. Here I am working in the prison. I'm in this environment,
Right.
and you just start thinking about, yeah, things are busy, but there's so many people that are hurting,
Yes.
and things that aren't addressed. Things that we don't mention, things that we just don't want to talk about. And to me,
Right.
this is one of those things, one of those topics where we need to kind of step out there and go, yeah, it's a difficult topic to talk
Right.
about, but it's something that needs to be talked about. And so I just reached out to you and said, hey man, what do you think? And you were like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I
And so
told I told
that's
Sonny
where
when
we're
he
at.
yeah I told Sonny when he called me. I was like, ironically, I'm doing these things on Tuesday nights, so talking about these very types of things of bringing awareness to mental health, and what an excellent idea to be able to have these types of conversations, particularly during September, the mental suicide awareness month. So, yeah, I was really Sonny, super excited that you reached out and wanted to do this, and there's one of the things that you said about just being a very difficult topic to talk about for the general public. I don't know, man. I hear your experience, and it'll be interesting to hear what you have to say about it. But even my experience as a therapist early on, I think even as a therapist who was trained to do what I was going to be doing for my career, even the topic of suicide for a therapist at the very beginning for me was really kind of a difficult thing to talk about, because maybe how I had envisioned it before, maybe I just wasn't quite ready to handle such a heavy topic with people. But I do think it is important for people to know that no matter where you are in life, no matter what you're doing, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to begin to talk about. Did you have any experiences like that at the beginning for yourself?
Yeah, it's funny because at the beginning for me, I was working with youths. I worked for Tri-County MHMR in the adolescent
Mm,
and child department. And so we had
right,
a lot of adolescents, of course, cutting
right.
self-mutilation is a real big thing with adolescents. And so at some point, there was some kind of conference going on,
Mm,
and I did a presentation on self-mutilation and just kind of dove into that because I had a lot of clients,
mm,
boys and girls, that were into
right,
that. And so that it was an easy thing to kind of discuss because it was so popular. And of course, now I'm in an adult population prison wise, but I'm sure it's still a popular thing with teens.
oh, absolutely,
Just a way of expressing themselves, a way of feeling something because I'm so numb, all these
right,
different things. And, understanding your client and understanding that, as crazy as that sounds, to cut yourself, to self mutilate, once you understand your client and understand the atmosphere, where they're coming from, the things they've gone through, you
right.
can understand the things that they do. And you can understand
Yes,
that, yeah, society, someone else might go, man, that's crazy. Well, no, if you understand your client, you understand that,
there,
that rationale, that little voice in their head, not an auditory hallucination, but that little conscious, that voice in their
right,
head
right.
that's telling them it's okay
Their
to do that.
their
They're
internal talking, their internal monologue sometimes, or a dialogue with themselves inside their head. You're right, and I think it's really one of the things that you said there about understanding the client. And I tell my patients this all the time. Like, if I don't understand you and can't get to know you, I can't help you. It's like the more that I can understand, the more that I can get into their world, the more I can begin to help them process out of it. Because it's not about us as therapists knowing all the answers, and it's not about the general public knowing all the answers. A lot of times people will say, "Oh, I don't know what to say." Sometimes there's nothing to say. You just have to be present with that person. Listen to them. Listen to what they're going through. Understanding them. You might be the first person who sat down with them who really cared to hear what they had to say in quite some time, or maybe their perception is that too. So that internal dialogue that they have inside their mind, if you can tap into that and let you into that, boy, that's like gold in helping these people kind of work through this very, very, very dark period. Yeah. So go ahead.
And also, you validate that person.
Yes.
Helping them understand. I say it. No telling how many times every single day. I tell guys, you better than anybody else.
Right.
This is your life. It's not mine. It's your life. And they'll be like, well, you don't understand. Well, help me understand. That's why I'm here. That's why we're meeting. If it's a private practice, that's why you're paying me. Help me understand. We've got time. Talk to me. But it's validating that person, letting them know that, hey, yes, I'm here for one reason, to try to help you. That's it.
Yes.
And so validating that person, letting them know that their feelings, as goofy and as crazy as someone else might have told them it is, it's for you to go, hey, that's how you feel. That's a real feeling.
That's exactly
and so let's
right.
talk about that.
Do you know, one of the people who are watching, and I want to tell everybody who I'm talking to, this is Sonny Flippo. He's a clinical psychotherapist, LPC, working for the state prison system. And one of the people that is watching just kind of made some of those kind of comments that they're worrying about our youth today. And that's Amy Ward, Amy Lazuski, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, I'm looking at this down on my phone. Also, I want to give a shout out to Angel Griffin. Angel Griffin is just watching us with us tonight too, Sonny. So Angel's on. And then also Betty Spear. Hey, Miss Spear, my teacher back from when I was in the grade school. So it's good to see you on here.
What we say here.
I'm sorry.
So we got to be careful what we say.
You're right. We have to be very careful. We have to be careful what they may say if they know us. So it is Lazuski. I thought that was you, Amy. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't getting the last name right. And so, so Sonny, Angel's also saying, as a nurse, it's good information that we're just talking about this, that they've been experiencing so much more psychological problems in the ER just in the last couple of months, I would definitely assume, and that they're needing someone just to help them. And somebody else made a comment, too, about they just need to know that somebody cares. It's just that somebody cares. And sometimes they don't know that. They don't believe that. They don't.
Yeah, and in the prison system, and I've worked in the prison system now in January, it'll be 18 years. So I've got a lot of time, in that population, and there's probably not a more forgotten population than the prison. And,
right.
When I first started working, it was a mindset of, oh my gosh, this population, blah, 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 blah. And my mindset was one way. And it's interesting the change that's taken place. And, so often these guys come in there, and I'll talk with them, and they'll just be like, man, there's something different about you. You're kind, you're nice. What's different? And I'll be like, well, one, I'm a Christian, and second of all, I have standards, and those standards don't change just because we're in a prison.
Right.
I'm going to treat you with respect, and I'm going to treat you like I want someone to treat me. And it's amazing how that's reciprocated back.
Yes. Yeah. This is that unconditional regard that we talk about in psychology, when we're going through our psychology courses. For people who don't know that, so it's a very Rogerian approach. It was a theorist by the name of Carl Rogers, who was a theorist in psychology. He talked about what he would term to as a positive regard, or that unconditional regard, which is exactly, Sonny, what you're talking about, is how you extend a very unconditional acceptance of the person that you're speaking with. Doesn't mean that you agree with them, doesn't mean that you have to agree what they've done or what they're thinking. It's just you're agreeing that they are a valuable human being, and you're giving them that respect. And let me tell you, people, when it comes to talking to people who have suicidal ideations, sometimes giving them the idea that they're valued as a person and given in that regard, that speaks more words than anything that you could possibly say. Sonny, you make a lot of comment. Of course, you're in the prison system, and so the prison is a different kind of an environment. But talk for a second, if you would, maybe about the idea of the prison of the mind. I mean, because a lot of us get into the prison of the mind, which is what keeps us into this trap of psychological of torment, and where we become to the point to where we can get suicidal. Do you think that there is like some kind of a maybe a connection of the prison of the mind and kind of what you're talking about with being able to get outside of that mental block?
Well, absolutely. And I talk often about how, when your world becomes very small, it can become very dangerous.
Yes.
And it's very small. You don't let anybody in. You isolate yourself, and your thoughts, you have only yourself to bounce things off of. You don't have other people to interact with. And, you start getting maybe paranoid or frustrated. And just it's almost kind of like a friend of mine that's also a therapist. We talk about the witch's brew of depression. That it's all these different ingredients, and just kind of what I'm talking about. Those are part of those ingredients: that hopelessness, the isolation, the ruminating on thoughts. All those things are almost like you're making this brew, and the brew is depression. And
absolutely right.
What comes from depression, it's never a positive thing. It's always a negative thing that's going to pull you down, and it's irrational. If you can ever stop and think, but often when you get to that point, you're not thinking rationally.
You're right.
And to have someone come along with what we're talking about, having someone come along and just say, "Hey, are you okay? What's going on?"
Right.
Or you don't, are you having a bad day, or just whatever it might be, just to engage somebody and to let that person know, and to kind of break that cycle, that thought process, and to kind of break into their small world, and just let them know that, hey, someone cares about you. Hey,
and you just made a comment too that I really think that we could dive into for a second. And you talk about that person is not in their right mind at that point. They're in a depressed state. They're in a depressed mind. So many times I hear people question, like, how could someone do that? How could someone take their life? Talk for a second about not being in that right mind, because I think that truly is kind of where the root of depression, suicidal ideation, and the suicidal intent and suicidal actions come from, is not in our right mind. Can you speak to that for a second?
Yeah, I mean, it's again going back to what we were saying earlier, talking about, other people might think it's crazy, it's irrational. When you get to that point, it's an interesting thing to think about, that when someone commits suicide or someone self-mutilates, they've gotten to a point where in their mind they think that this is the best outcome. They've gotten to the point where, again, it's irrational when you think about it, but to them, it's a rational thought. It's either I'm too much of a burden for someone, and so I need to take, I need to check out. I'm hurting so bad, I feel so numb. I need to cut myself. I need to hurt myself.
Right.
No one cares about me, and so I'm going to do this to get some attention. It's just all these irrational thoughts, but to them, they've gotten to a point, again, where I was talking about the world is so small, where they've isolated themselves. They don't have anyone else to talk to, and so these thoughts have ruminated in their mind over and over and over and over again, to the point where they finally convinced themselves that this is a good outcome. This is the best outcome for what I'm feeling. And in reality, often, if you can get someone through that and you can go back, they can kind of see it on the other side. Like, oh man, how in the world, how did I get like that? What was I thinking?
And to tail end on that type of a mentality, when you're talking about they're in that mind space and they're in that small mind and they're just swirling around, sometimes that irrationality becoming their rationality, right, is they then begin to think that not only is this a rational way out to them, although we know it's irrational, it's not necessarily a selfish act. Some people, like, suicide is so selfish. And I can understand that from the person who is grieving the person who's killed themselves. But from the person who has the suicidal mindset, many times it's not at all a selfish act. It's actually an act of compassion because they don't want to burden anybody anymore. And that's the scary spot when someone gets to the point to where they feel like there's such a burden on somebody that it would be better off for them to no longer be a burden to anyone, so they decide to just remove that. And so there's a lot of compassion that we can put out with maybe helping people understand that this is not necessarily an act of revenge, although I mean, I think we can come back to have other conversations. You agree to that too, by the way, right? To come back and have other conversations about the different aspects of this. But if they're in that space, boy, it's really they think that they're doing us all a favor. So the audio, Sonny, is not going on real quick. Hopefully we'll get his audio back, because I'm sure what he said was actually the most important thing of the entire night. So I'm not hearing your audio. Is anybody else hearing his audio? So I want to make sure it's not just me not hearing it. So if anybody could chime in. So yeah, I'm not hearing your audio. So let's try to get your audio back on up. I'm going to answer some of these questions because we have some questions coming through. So yeah, they're not. I don't think they're hearing you at this point. So we're having people say that we're not hearing your audio, Sonny. So what we might do. Is I might have you hang up and let's reconnect you on the call. This is what happens, folks, when it's live. So we're gonna let Sonny hang out for a second. We're gonna get Sonny back on the line here in a minute, and then we're gonna have him continue the conversations. So thanks you guys for joining on. I am talking with a friend of mine. His name is Sonny Flippo. He is a clinical psychotherapist for the prison systems, and we actually went to college together at the University of Hardin-Baylor. So I think we got audio back for Sonny. So Sonny, let me bring you back on. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I hear you just fine.
All right, well, good. We can hear you now too. So I'm sorry about that, guys. So we were talking about.
All that matters on my end, but you're froze again.
Yeah, well, I hope it's not a horrible frozen face. I mean, that's kind of the only scary part about
you're shocked.
Okay, all right, but you're hearing me though, right?
I hear you just fine.
All right, excellent, excellent. Hey, so Jeffrey Boyd's on with us tonight, so I'm going to say a shout out to Jeffrey. Also to Wes McCabe, Brian Akers.
Roll on.
Yeah, he's driving a 18-wheeler at this point. He has a really good question for you. He says, what about the difference between clinical depression versus a chemical depression? Do you want to tackle that question?
Well, I mean, chemical would be something that's created by something that you've ingested, that you've taken, I'm assuming. And so, I mean, chemical depression, the only thing I can think of, I mean, that depressant would be like, alcohol is a depressant. Right. I mean, clinical depression is going to be something where, I mean, unfortunately, you're going to be cycling in and out. And so, I mean, God made us emotional people. And that's the thing. I think people a lot of times talk about mental illness and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, God made us emotional. That's why we cry. That's why we laugh. That's why we get angry. There's nothing wrong with showing emotion.
Absolutely.
What happens, where it's a problem, is that if it's interfering with your daily life, if your marriage is falling apart because you're yelling and screaming at your wife or your kids all the time, or for a few days out of the week you can't get out of bed. I mean, that's when it's creating a problem with your daily life. Then that's when it becomes a clinical problem. Right. So I don't know what you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think Jeff he's clarifying it a little bit for us. He's talking about like a hormonal imbalance or a chemical imbalance, and kind of what I would tell in on what Sonny is saying, and I agree with that. Like there are certain chemicals that we ingest or we take, drugs, alcohol, things like that, that definitely cause sometimes the depression to get worse or to worsen, and it really kind of I guess it amplifies those things. However, I think maybe Jeff, what you might be referring to is that there are definitely chemicals within our brain that are not firing properly when we're depressed. I think the difference is going to be sometimes we really don't know which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Like, in other words, is somebody depressed because they have chemical imbalances like the dopamine or like the serotonin and the norepinephrine? Is that what's causing the depression, or is it that the serotonin and the norepinephrine is not working properly, so therefore we get depressed? And those are just some examples. So I think the difference for me when we talk, Sonny, about a clinical depression is we're talking about a true psychiatric diagnosis. We're talking about a psychiatric condition to where the brain is really not, the synapses of our brain are not functioning properly, and it's either causing a reuptake, in other words, the little neurotransmitters to fire back inappropriately, or not enough going through the synapses. And we could, maybe what we could do is maybe one day get a psychiatrist on here to talk about exactly, medically kind of what's going on there. But that's kind of the gist of what happens. So when you have that type of a clinical depression, it is definitely something going on with the way that your brain is processing and firing those neurotransmitters. Hard part is...
I would just add one last thing to that,
Yeah,
Jason.
sure.
For Jeff, I would say the chemical, as far as what he's talking about hormonal-wise, to me, that's something that's much more treatable with medication than therapy. The hormonal kind of depression, kind of chemical, your system's kind of jacked up for whatever reason.
Right.
That's where you need medication to kind of balance things out. Where the clinical depression, it's going to be a combination of both. Therapy, learning different skills, learning different, techniques and things along with medication to kind of balance things out.
Yeah, so Amy Beeson, hey Amy, thank you for your comment. She's also talking about as a therapist who also works in a psych hospital. She makes the point that the chemical depression definitely feeds the clinical depression. It's very cyclical, and I would definitely agree with that. Because when you have those that chemical imbalance in your brain anyway, and then you start adding drugs and alcohol on top of that, it can be very, very slippery slope for just not a good outcome. And there's also other kinds of things, guys, that when we talk about clinical depressions, there could be the reasons we're depressed are not related to a psychiatric illness at all. It could be hormonal in the sense of maybe premenstrual dysphoric disorder in ladies, or it could be some gynecological and obstetric issues with the hormonal balances. It could be after childbirth, postpartum depressions. So there's all kinds of ways that we experience depression. But when it comes to a clinical depression, I think we in the psych world will say that that's definitely the psychiatric illness of the neurotransmitters not firing properly. And medication can be very, very helpful. And talk therapy can be very helpful. When you get really depressed, let's talk about depression real quick, actually. These are great comments, guys, coming in. Thank you so much for joining in tonight and joining on the conversations. Sonny, let's talk about a little bit about, kind of when you see people get into that depression, and you had talked about it, mentioned it earlier, about how their mind tends to get into that small world mentality that that's all they're seeing. One of the things that I was going to add on to that earlier is like when the whole word depression, when we get depressed, many people continue to depress. In other words, they continue to go down that path. How do you help someone break out of that as a therapist?
Well, in the prison setting and free world, so-called people not in prison, free world, it's two different things. I learned very quickly, one of the things that still frustrates me greatly in the prison is that you're very limited on what you can do as far as therapy techniques, that kind of thing, to help people. In the free world, to me, what I encourage people to do is to do something different. It's very hard to be depressed when you're doing something for someone else, to volunteer your time, to give up yourself, to force yourself, which at times when you're depressed, it's incredibly hard to do. But to make yourself get up and get out and to do something for other people, it's incredibly hard to be depressed and that whole mindset when you're giving and doing things for other people.
Yes. Yeah, it's almost like we have to act as if. We have to get up and do something behaviorally. So maybe our emotions and our thinking can actually follow suit. Sometimes we just don't feel like it, but if we act it and we do it, sometimes our emotions and our thinking kind of follows behind. So yeah, good words for that. One of the things that we also talked about, and maybe tonight we can touch on it a little bit, is, just being people of faith. We're both Christians. We both, I think, grew up in the church. We both I'm assuming. I think we've talked about this before. Um, Depression and suicide. In talking about that in the Christian world and in the churches, also in the past has been a very I don't want to say I don't know how I want to say it. It's just been a very hot topic. It's been a very difficult topic because I think there's so many things that so many different people believe about the religious aspects of suicide. It might be something that we want to come back on another episode to talk specifically about that, and maybe even ask maybe get Jay Roy or get Jeremy Roy or somebody to jump on with us and talk about that as well. But what do you think about that topic about suicide and depression in the church, and how have you handled that?
Well, to me, first of all, it seems kind of obvious, but first of all, the main thing to me is you have to believe that God is real, that God is who He says He is. Because if that's not the case, then nothing else really matters.
Right.
But to me, that's the number one thing. And then second of all, to me, the Bible is given to us. It's like a textbook. It's
Right.
like if I've got a class and the test is going to be given from this book, I need to study this book to get the answers so I pass the test.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the Bible is very clear. There's all different kind of stories in there, and the stories of men of powerful faith. I don't care if it's Elijah, when after he had done this incredible thing with the prophets of Baal, he defeated all the prophets, and then like in the very next chapter, we see him running away because Jezebel's after him, and he's hiding out in the mountains, and he's just having this pity party.
Right.
You see in the Bible talking about Jonah, where he's begging God to go ahead and kill him because there's no one else like him left. You see people like Moses that talks to God about how, I stutter, I'm not very good, you've got the wrong guy. In the New Testament, you see Jesus himself in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's praying and he's begging God to take this burden from him. And the anxiety and the stress is so great that he talks about that he bleeds sweat drops of blood.
Right.
Because the anxiety and stress is so great. And to me, it's like, why are these stories in the Bible? Why? Because God wants us to know that we're human. Right. And that things happen, and life is going to be hard, and you're going to be overwhelmed by things.
Absolutely.
And there's examples of incredible men of faith, and you see them at their weakest, but you also see them at their strongest, and there's faithfulness along the way. And to me, that's encouraging for me as a Christian to be able to read that and see that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things Jeff just made a point on, Jeff Boyd, again, he said it's very much a shame mindset versus a grace mindset, and I like that. I've never heard it put that way before, Jeff, and I really kind of identify that because I think so many times, unbeknownst to people, when they talk to us, it reinforces maybe that irrationality in our own mind that we become shameful about the things that we've done, and when we can extend grace to them, and we can extend that unconditional regard, actually, that we were talking about in the psychological world of Carl Rogers. That is that grace mindset, which helps them understand that no matter what they've done, irregardless of what they think or irregardless of what experience they've gone through, they're still valued as a person. And I think that's an excellent point, that shame mindset versus grace mindset. Carol Golden, also, Sonny is a friend of mine, she's watching tonight. She would like for us to speak a little bit about the importance of exercise in the role of depression. You kind of touched on that a little bit at the very beginning, but talk a little bit about the importance of the exercise role with depression.
Yeah, dude. And I was going to say add that, but I'm like, I've said enough. When we were talking about, you asked me about depression, and I talked about doing something for other people and all that kind of thing. But absolutely, one of the things in my private practice at our church that it's one of the staple things that I tell people. Like, are you working out? Are you going to a gym? Yes. If you go to a gym, there's something that happens, that serotonin level, something, the endorphins kick in, something when you work out that makes you feel good. There's something about doing something for yourself, and you run, you work out, and it kicks in, and it, again, just like I mentioned, as far as doing something for other people, when you do something for yourself, you do feel better about yourself, and and when you start, your clothes fit differently, and you look in the mirror, and there's something about that feeling good about yourself that goes to your mind too, and it's just it everything follows suit. So I think exercise, absolutely, it's very important.
Yeah, do you know, and also too, just the whole idea of exercise, and when your chemicals are kicking in. I mean, there is an endorphin rush. I mean, your endorphins and your serotonin levels increase, and when they increase, and you can kind of continue to train them to do that, that just kind of helps your mood feel better anyway. And so you might not kick a clinical depression, but then again, it might. It might. There's so many things like that I think that are so important that we continue to strive to do. Sandra
It's finding
Godley,
balance too. You have
yeah,
to find balance with everything you do,
everything.
and so
So
that's important.
So a couple of more people here are signing on, Sonny. For people who are just popping on, I'm talking to a friend of mine, Sonny Flippo, who is a psychotherapist who works in the prison system. But he and I also went to college together. We've known each other for quite some time, and we're both pretty passionate about spreading awareness about mental health issues. And so that's who I'm talking to tonight. So, Sonny, I want to send a shout out to Sandra Godley. She's a friend of mine in Coventry, England. So, Sandra, welcome tonight. Girl, it's like 1 o'clock where you are. Why are you not in bed? You must not be on the show tomorrow morning. Sonny, she's a person you might want to get connected with eventually. She's very, very passionate about mental health. She's doing a ton over in England. She is a radio host for the BBC and does a Sunday morning talk show every week, and she's done a ton for the BBC there in Coventry and Warwickshire. So, Sandra, thank you for joining us tonight. Carol Golden, it has truly been my lifesaver over the years, talking about exercise. You know, I really do think that I would encourage anybody and everybody, including myself, I've got to get back into it. You know, maybe now that the Texas heat's gone, I'm not going to die from getting up and running. But I know that I feel better when I exercise. You know, Sonny, I think you're right about if we pour into ourselves and we allow ourselves to feel valuable, that can fight our depression as well. So also Cindy Roberts is on with us, Sonny, Derek Westbrook. I mean, we have a lot of people hopping on.
What's up, CBN?
Yeah. So there's also a comment I want to read, if I can get over to it. I can't see it right now. Pardon me, I'm going to get out of the frame here, but it's like, but even sometimes the person who actually is in church every Sunday, and truly all they have all the faith in the world, but they still think of suicide. How do you address that?
Well, I mean, again, you engage the person, and you give them options. You talk to them about as far as, you know, where their mindset is. You know, to me, if a person is constantly thinking about suicide, then they're in a constant state of irrational thought. And you know, it's hard to help someone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I almost want to use the word fix, but that really is not appropriate in our line of work.
Right.
But as far as help, it's hard to help someone if they're not in a state where rational thinking, they can understand. Self-awareness, I don't care, and I'm sure you would agree with me, self-awareness is the key thing in therapy. If you're not aware of your problem,
Right.
if you're not aware of what's going on, and you're not aware of what can be a solution, then I can't help you. And
That's right.
so
That's right.
if someone is stuck with the idea that this is the best option, that this is what needs to happen, then that person probably needs inpatient help. They need more than just whatever they're getting from the psychotherapist, from their medication,
That's
because
right.
something is broken, something is not right,
Yes.
and probably there's nothing that we're going to be able to give them to help them if it's something that they're just totally stuck on.
Right. You know, yeah. So there is that underlying, I guess, not desire. I think people desire to get better. That underlying ability, maybe to see past the irrationality. So, you know, I want to add on to, you know, like for the church, for example, it is hard because there are a lot of people in churches. You're right, and this is Deanne Dutra who's commenting here. I think you're right about that. People who go to church every day, or every week when the doors are open, who they're very strong in their faith. You know, I think that that's just a testimony to show that, again, nobody is immune. And like Sonny's saying, just to reach out there and be there for them and to show them that compassion. Maybe also go back to what maybe one of our listeners was talking about too, about that shame mindset versus grace mindset, to make sure that we're not there to shame them for being depressed. In other words, that could be all kinds of things, and I've heard many times. And Sonny, maybe you can chime in on this as well. But you know, we need to pray about it. And guys, I agree with that statement. We absolutely have to pray about it. We absolutely have to go to Christ about our problems. However, I want people to know that sometimes it is so vitally important to not only pray, but to help those people seek professional assistance. And those professional assistance is seeing your psychologist, your therapist or your psychiatrist, knowing that medication management is absolutely okay. There are certain times you just, I'm going to say it, and people might, I don't know how they'll take it, but there's just certain times I don't think that we can pray away our depression. I think it's important for people to know that mindset, it gets into a little bit of that shame mindset as opposed to the grace mindset. So no, we're going to pray with them, we're going to pray for them, but we're also going to talk with them and get them help and help encourage them to seek professional assistance. I just told Sonny before we got on here tonight that I had a call today, actually. And Deanne, you'll probably appreciate this. It was a call from a person that I knew from church. I've known him for a long time. He was the minister of education in the church I was in. He was also one of the strongest Christian men I think I know. I'm going to give a shout out to him. His name is Charlie Robinson. So Charlie, if you're watching, this is you. He's been mentoring men for a long time. And he called me today about one man particularly that he wants me to see professionally because he, as a church person, recognizes and realizes that there's more to it for this young man, that this young man needs professional assistance. Not that he's not professional in the church, absolutely he is, but it's a different kind of profession. So, Sonny, I just wanted to throw that out there for sure. Anything that you want to add to that?
Dude, I think I wrote down the word superficial because I didn't want to lose that. I think, going back to what people were asking about church, about being depressed, about praying away, all these different kind of things, we as a society, we are almost conditioned now to be superficial. Hey man, what's going on? How you doing? Man, I'm good. I'm all right. We're not conditioned to engage. Going back to this whole COVID thing, wearing masks, social distancing, all this stuff, it's superficial. If you're going to deal with somebody with depression, if you're going to deal with somebody, it doesn't have to be depressed. You're just going to deal with someone who just is hurting, who feels alone, who feels left out. You have to invest. And I think as a church, we have not always done the best with that. And I think a lot of times, going back to what you said, it's very easy to go, man, hey, you need to get in the Word, man, you need to pray it away. And absolutely, like I said before, if I'm going to take a test, I need to get in the textbook and I need to read it, and the answers are there. But let me tell you, there's something about being around positive people, and there's something about being around people that will encourage me and build me up and say good things about me that make me feel good. And there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean that I'm weak and that I can't pull myself up. It just means that I'm human and I need people to inject in me some positiveness. I tell my wife all the time, and I work in a prison. It's a negative. It's an incredibly depressing. It's an environment full of failure. Everybody there in prison has failed in their marriage, in their life, in school, in their jobs, in society, you name it. It's failure. And so that just becomes a part of their world in that environment. And it's very easy to get sucked into that. Absolutely. And so there's something about being around people that are positive, that encourage you, that can build you up, and that can help you kind of stay out of those holes and those places in life that'll pull you down. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes tons of sense. It kind of goes on to what Amy Beeson Mills, she just chimed on here and she made a comment. She says that her fear is there are people in our church who will never get help or tell people they are suicidal because of the shame and the failure that they feel. And it kind of, you hit on that just briefly when you were talking about that right there, is about just that, the superficialness that sometimes we're not able to be real with people because there is a shame factor about suicide anyway. And so they don't speak up about it. Carlton Pridgeon, who's also on tonight, says people are people, and just because you're a Christian does not make you insensible. Yeah, I mean, people to people, you're right about that. Absolutely. Just because we're Christians doesn't mean that we're going to be avoid of difficulties and hardships. I mean, you touched on that earlier, Sonny, by all the examples within the Bible of all the people who had suffered and who had suffered mentally.
Right. Yeah, well, and the New Testament talks about consider it pure joy when you endure trials, knowing the testing of your faith produces endurance. And to me, it's like, I'm sure me and you and probably everybody that's on here
Right.
can talk about different things that we've gone through. And if you allow those things to make you a better person, that's the thing. And that's part of that irrational thinking and
Right.
the self-awareness. If you can kind of look at it like, okay, this is happening in my life because God is stretching me. God is conditioning. God is almost like being in the gym working out. God
Right.
is building me up to be a better person. Then
Right.
something positive can come out of that. If you
Yes.
choose to look at whatever that issue is in a negative light, and that, oh man, God hates me, he's really mad at me, I've
Yes.
really done something wrong, well then you're probably going to be on a slippery slope.
Yes.
And, so.
One of the things that we haven't talked about tonight, and I knew this was going to happen. It's already 7:50, so we're going to have to wrap up for the evening. But here's one of the things that we haven't talked about tonight that I really was hoping that we could get into. So you're just going to have to come back. You're going to have to come back and talk to me again.
Okay.
Because I would really like to get into men's health and men's issues with mental health. We are, as men, a very difficult population to deal with sometimes because we don't typically want to reach out. We don't typically want to be looked at as vulnerable or weak. We don't want to be looked at as a failure, like you talk about the prison, about all the things that we fail at. And so therefore I think men sometimes have a very, very difficult time opening up for the idea of seeking out psychotherapy and to talk about it. So men's mental health, I think, is a topic, and men's suicide issues is one I'd love to have you back to talk about, because I think that is so vitally important as men, is that we pull together as brothers to help ourselves pull through these experiences. So would you be willing to come back and talk to me about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. So before we wrap up, Ashley Kelly is on tonight. Ashley, I appreciate you coming on. She asked earlier, what is maybe 2 to 3 things that you would encourage someone to do to maintain a positive mental health?
Well,
As we wrap up, this is kind of a wrap up for us tonight.
yeah, and that not just to rehash what I've already said, but I mean,
Yeah.
to me personally, and what I would encourage other people to do is, the things I put in my mind, the things I've set before my eyes, what's going to go in, what I'm looking at, what's going to go in my mind, it's going to return at some point, good or bad. And so, I'm gonna read things that are positive. I'm not going to just put a bunch of junk in my mind as far as what I'm reading. The music that I'm going to listen to, I always listen to praise and worship, man. I don't care if I'm at work, at home. I want to be encouraged by that. I love elevation worship.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, other people, Chris Tomlin, Hillsong, all that kind of stuff. I'm really big into elevation worship right now.
Yeah.
Working out, I think that's a huge part. Personally,
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I know this is going to be good for me when I'm working out. Me on a personal note, with my relationship with my wife, not the sexual part, but the emotional part.
Right.
When that's healthy, I'm healthy. I'm a much better mindset. And so making sure that my relationship with my wife and my kids, my immediate family, making sure that's healthy. Because I have nothing to offer anybody else if that's broken.
Yes.
And so making sure that relation part is healthy is important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. And one of the last things I want to make sure that we definitely make sure people know, I put it up here on the screen for us. There is a suicide prevention hotline, everybody. That's 1-800-273-TALK, which is 8255. Or there's also the treatment referral helpline, which is the 1-877-726-4727. If you guys need any assistance, or you have something that's going on that you feel like that you're having struggles with tonight, please reach out to one of those numbers. You're also very welcome to reach out to myself or to Sonny on Facebook. I will tell you that we cannot do therapy over Facebook. We cannot do that. However, we would be very happy of getting you to in the direction of a therapist to seek some help, because we're all in this together. We're all in this together. So, Sonny, I appreciate your time tonight. Man, this just opens up a huge topic that I knew we couldn't address in one evening. So I appreciate you agreeing to come back for maybe a couple more episodes to continue the talk about suicide. So, man, I appreciate it, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you for joining me.
All right, man.
All right.
God bless you.
God bless you, bud. All right, folks. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight on this episode of Shrink Wrapped. And we are so, again, passionate about what we're trying to accomplish as therapists, as fellow people, to make sure that we can spread the awareness of mental health and continue the conversations. I'm very glad. I've said this before. I'll say it again tonight. I don't think we're at the point that we're starting the conversations anymore. I think we're very much in the part of continuing the conversations. So you guys, thank you so much for joining us. All your comments. If I missed one, I promise I'll go back and read them, and we'll try to get back with you guys. So anyway, thank you again for tonight. We'll see you next week when I'll be joined by Carol Meyer-Willingham, who is a fellow therapist and a fellow vocalist that I've worked with, and we'll be talking about finding your voice. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon. That's a wrap.